No, just to kick us off, it'd be nice just to understand a little bit of the background, and I am going to start with you, Frank, because as an American who's relocated to see the wonders of Europe and has come here permanently, just a little bit of background on yourself, and tell us also about your company and what you do there.
So Frank Satterwhite, went to UC Berkeley, grew up in California, born in California, Stanford. My earliest years were formed because I grew up right around Silicon Valley, but I'm from a city called East Palo Alto, and the residents there could not participate in any of this tech. Tech that was shaping the world, you had a whole community of people that were excluded. So that's really driven me and my focus. I started working for NATO, ended up in Europe, working for NATO and U.S. military, doing joint warfighting integration, as well as cybersecurity. And what I found, besides enjoying the European lifestyle, is if you take the same set of circumstances and forget what language people speak, you have the same cyber challenges and problems. So one of the reasons I'm committed to being in Europe and working with military, NATO, but also private sector, because it gives me a global view to stay in the fight and make sure that we are dealing with cyber, bringing together the brightest minds, the best ideas, and the type of companies that are invested in more than just increasing their bottom line, which is money. So that's a quick summary of me.
We'll come back to some of that in due course. Pranav, what's your quick summary of your company and what you do?
So my name is Pranav. I lead cybersecurity practices at Solaris. We are a banking as a service company out of Berlin. We have a German banking license, which we use to give financial services to our customers. We are the biggest banking as a service company in Europe. We are in Germany, France, Italy, Spain. And we wanted to move to UK, but getting a banking license is extremely difficult. So we acquired a company in UK last year, which has a banking license.
Mark?
It makes it easy. And I have my background in security engineering, operations, incident response, strategy, and I'm using that to lead at Solaris now.
Very good, very good. I think Ferenc is going to need your mic here, Frank.
Thanks. So I'm Ferenc. I'm the CTO at DataGuard. We do privacy as a service, information security as a service, and compliance as a service in the broader field. Prior to DataGuard, I was actually a tech founder, and I've done it for the last 20 years, more or less. And I sharpened sort of my awareness of the importance of privacy and also information security when I was doing a platform for identification of people. So if you, for example, rent a car, or if you open a bank account, or if you get a SIM card, you have to identify yourself. If you do that in Germany, you probably use our software. And losing that information is something that's just not an option. You can't lose somebody's identity. So I became really aware of how important that whole stuff is.
I bet you did. That's interesting. Now, one of the first questions I wanted to ask the group was, how easily is it for your teams to align security to the business? And there's many reasons why businesses are generally focused on other things, whether it's driving revenue growth, acquiring more customers, or those things. But what's your secret sauce, or what's your experience of enabling your teams to understand and align what they're doing to the business? Pranav, why don't you kick us off with this one?
Sure. Security has a bad rap of being the money-burning machine, right?
Just say no.
Yeah, it just goes and goes and nothing comes back. All the EDRs and the SESAMs and the Synapse and fancy data lakes not gonna pay themselves. So my job is to convey to the board and the business that we are actually having value in having this investment into security. We are actually creating trust between us as a business and the potential customers, and building assurance with the existing customers. And this helps secure our IP, our people, identities, infra, assets, and whatnot. So me explaining that in a business logic has helped me in this role and my prior role as well to show that, yes, security is a business driver.
And do you find that it's easier in the financial world to make that link because the customers associate privacy and security with their funds that are being held by the bank? Do you think it's easier in banking and finance than it is in other worlds, or is that just a...
It's especially
misnomer?
easier in Germany because we are a German bank and we get a banking license from the Bundesbank. We are regulated by the BaFin, is the regulatory authority. And you must have heard about the Wirecard incident.
Yeah.
And BaFin doesn't want another Wirecard incident in Germany or in DACH. So selling security controls is relatively easy in financial industry because you need to be compliant with BIT, MRS, ISO, SOC 2, PCI DSS, and you name it. We go through 11, 12 audits per year. We are on 7th now. So those implementing controls and those are relatively easy compared to a modern SaaS company.
Right. So Frank, you've worked largely in very different industries. What's your experience of aligning the security teams to the goals of the organization?
For this question, really focusing on the work I'm doing with Nicola and Derek at Fresenius, picture an organization that has over 40,000 employees, over 100 countries, healthcare. So the reason I joined the team is it was after a big ransomware attack. It crippled the infrastructure. You have criminals who want to prevent people from getting life-saving support, which is all the motivation I needed. But so the business driver is people. It's also profit, right? But you have all these different countries, localities, have their own set of regulations and rules. And so aligning the business and the risk of the business can be quite challenging because you have to take all these things into consideration. So working with Nicola and Derek, what we were able to do as we built up and improved our incident response process, every pain point where looking at the organization, understanding the threat profile, we said, well, there's a higher likelihood that we could be attacked here. We either use process, technology, or upskilling people to put added emphasis. So the way the last ransomware attack happened, we applied controls. And the last thing, when you think about aligning the business to how we respond every day to incidents, is what we all do, you have management that will spend money for controls if you can simply turn around, and what we were able to successfully do is say, hey, listen, this is the results of what happened. This is what's going on in the world we live in. Other organizations that have the same threat profile that we have just had this type of attack, and this is what we need to protect the business. And that using what's happening in the real world, as well as using standards to align our strategy to our incident response approaches, it's been pretty effective, I would say.
That's impressive. I have a slight tangent here. You mentioned ransomware.
Yes.
So, do we know, quiz question for the group, when was the first ransomware attack? We asked this came up last week. It was a bit strange. Sorry, I'm going off to the side here for a second.
Jeopardy.
And the answer was 1989. And there was this slightly more seasoned gentleman across the table from me. And he sort of sparked up with the answer and said, yeah, it was send $199 to an address in Panama. He seemed to know an awful lot about it. So anyway, we carried on, and he said, do you know how I knew about it? I said, tell me. He said, my son was involved. So there we go. Anyway, we didn't need that little diversion, did we? Ferenc, tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on business alignment and what's your experience of how to make that happen?
For us, it's pretty straightforward. We help people to build trust through operationalizing compliance. So when we tell people, hey, you should really make security a focus, if we don't do that ourselves, we look awfully stupid, right? So we really put a lot of emphasis on trying to walk that talk as well, and not recommend anything that we wouldn't do ourselves.
So you have to live the dream because that's your whole proposition, but therefore it's inherently ingrained in the business that security is a differentiator. So if I asked each of the three of you, if there was a continuum of one is the security team is the thought police, who are business prevention, 5 or 6 is we're enablers, and 10 is we are competitive differentiators, where would you score your organization on that continuum?
I would say between sales enablement and I wouldn't say I'm a competitor differentiator. And
But surely, it's a German bank. You know, it's a gift, isn't it?
but my team is not the money-making machine. But we help to sell the business slightly better.
Right.
We secure the properties, we secure the intellectual IPs, and assets and customers. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't keep myself on the top of the chain, but slightly above the sales enablement.
That's a very modest answer, but I'll take it. I'll take it. Frank, what are your thoughts?
So mine is not so modest because especially, well, when you think of NATO, well, you are protecting what we believe in, right? When you think of something like Fresenius, you are protecting people's rights all over the world to be healthy and get better. And so people have to have confidence in the company. If you don't have confidence in this organization that I have a loved one that's seeking care from, but their IT systems just were hacked. They just had a ransomware attack. One attack can really damage the reputation of organizations. So I really believe that we are making sure that people have confidence in our community, our cyber community, and that we have a business that can not only serve them, but serve them securely. So I think it's really important.
Great. Thanks. Ferenc?
I would consider us definitely differentiators because we're actually driving to change others, to really help them adopt better practices and make them aware of the risks that they're exposed to. I think one thing that really works well in sort of convincing others is if you tell them like how expensive it is to have a data breach, right? So it's maybe you don't want to spend those like 100K on becoming compliant, but if you spend a couple of million on breach mitigation, that's far worse, right? And that sort of brings it home.
All relative, isn't it? I'm going to change tack here, but before I do, any other quick questions from the group? Thing here, right. So apart from being three magnificent captains of industry, you've all got incredible experience of testing and very sound business judgment, because I think each of you have worked with Cobalt at a different point in your careers. What's your experience of testing and Cobalt, and just any advice you've got to the group here? Why don't we start this time here?
Well, I think you have to test from all angles, to be honest. So it starts with like embedding testing in your software development processes, right? So it starts with training your staff to actually know how to be aware of security issues. We do phishing trainings, all sorts of trainings, basic privacy trainings, things to get the awareness going. Apart from that, we do external testing through Cobalt and understand where our vulnerabilities are. We also do internal testing, the other way around, to understand vulnerabilities in our infrastructure and our code. We test our images, we scan our images for vulnerabilities, we run scans on our source code. So very extensive, I would say, and continuous. So build it into the pipelines, make sure that each deployment is green-lighted, make sure dependencies are up to date. Yeah, a huge priority.
Great. Sounds like you're pretty far down the maturity model there. Excellent. Frank, anything
I
to add
think
there?
it's two parts. At Fresenius, Nicola has implemented some really great, like a regular pen test that constantly allow us to strengthen our organization because we get a list of vulnerabilities and then we mitigate them. But another thing to think about is we're actually using Cobalt for readiness. So in military NATO, you have something called readiness. And basically, the only way to know readiness is actually to execute red team or some sorts of simulated attacks. And during this readiness testing, what I really like about Cobalt is I kind of demanded, not demand, that's a bad word, but I said, hey, listen, I want you to simulate an attack that I know is happening in the wild right now. And so we're working with your team, and we literally are going to simulate a Maui ransomware attack. Of course, we're not going to have the payload but we'll have like DTrack and 3Proxy, and we'll have some of the attack chain as it would happen in real world. And so each phase of our incident response, we're able to tell very clearly, how well we performed, where we need to improve, where we didn't do so well. Was the detection proper? Did we have proper incident response? Did people have the tools they needed to respond? So from both a technical and communication standpoint, this type of testing, I really think people should do more. Because when it happens, you've already done it.
Right.
So.
Preemptive. Fair enough.
For me, pen testing is really important, but it's not the only component in my security arsenal. Right? Like Fern said, it's the whole thing, from the whole very, I'm not going to try not to use the left word, the whole left of the SDLC to the whole right in the production, how far left you want to go to the developer IDE, to the source code management, to the CI/CD, to the containerized applications in your production. Would you want defense in depth with perimeter defenses, with WAF and multiple methods of logins and MFA, RBAC, ABAC, audit logging, trailing, whatnot, right? Pushing all of that into a data lake, looking for anomalies, alerts, workflows, incident response, right? For us in Solaris, every time we have a new iteration of the product, and like Frank said, we want to know how it would be like to be attacked with real-life techniques. And we want to know how it would be if we bring down our defenses. So we keep it on a separate sandbox. We don't have RBACs. We don't have WAF in front of it. We don't have other API security solutions looking at it. It's just plain, simple, unguarded application. And see what the hackers can do. This is one part of it, and this is just Solaris. The second component is we are a banking as a service company. It's a service to our customers, which means they are using our API. So this is a supply chain security issue as well for us. So we make sure that every partner get on to our infrastructure, use our API, gets pen tested by Cobalt, and to see how they rank in terms of their security. And we have set some threshold, and if we are below, no, you're going to fix your stuff and come back later.
So had you seen that use case in prior lives, or did you just introduce that as part of the business process when you were...
It's been there since, Daniel, keep me honest, it's been there since the time we had customers, right? Yeah.
Wow. That's quite an unusual case, but that's impressive. Any questions here from the group, or we're going to come back to
Yeah, actually,
to you,
one thing that comes to mind is like security is something that you can never do enough of, right? But you know that there's also a limit to what's secure enough, right? So for example, 2-factor authentication, great. Now everything takes a little bit longer, but you want to do 3-factor authentication. Not many people want to do that, right? Or 4-factor authentication. You just get tired. It's enough. Like, how do you define the level of security for the current stage of your business?
I don't know if I can sleep all right. I think I will be fine. And I think I do. So, yeah, you definitely need to find a balance between convenience and not being a pain in the ass. So, credentials, MFA, hardware tokens, then you take care of the design by introducing RBACs, audit logging, audit trails, you being having this security umbrella or having this holistic view of your infrastructure, people, identities, would give you opportunities to look at, to look for anomalies, define what is normal. And if you have that baseline, if you know what is normal to you and your organization, you need to find that balance not to cause inconvenience to your customers or users, then apply security like that.
something I've heard different people say the last 2 days. So what's enough, right? Well, we know when you have any type of testing, you're going to end up getting a long list of vulnerabilities. I think this gentleman was talking about it in our breakout session. You get a long list of vulnerabilities, high criticals, mediums, lows. And then you're bombarding IT teams to fix all these vulnerabilities. I think it's our job as the cyber professionals to look at the results, understand the business acceptance of risk, that level, and then identify those vulnerabilities and findings that cross the threshold of acceptable risk. So what does that mean? You may give us 70 findings. Well, after we look at them, 30 of those medium, yeah, they're a problem, but we need to focus on these high and criticals. And those medium, for now, we can accept the risk. Because all the IT people that actually do a lot of the remediation, what do they have? They have meetings. They have to keep the business running. So something that I think Nicola and I have found has been really successful is when we're getting your findings, we're really giving them what we feel after we look at the understanding our business, after we look at the impact, giving them what's absolutely necessary. And that level, not everything is resolved, but we're operating at a level where there's acceptable risk.
Right, so there's another level of management judgment and oversight that you're adding as professionals. So we talked, a couple of you have mentioned program maturity, and that goes to professional advancement. Not everybody wants to be a CISO, strange though that may seem. But I'm sure there's varied sort of experience and skills in the group here. Perhaps you could each share a little bit of what's been some learnings for you as your careers have sort of moved and meandered and rocketed and plateaued and rocketed again, or whatever they've done. Any sort of things that have changed the trajectory, or specific learnings that you think have made a difference?
After the news from the last 2 weeks, the Uber CISO, I'm not sure if I'll do the same.
Nothing like humility.
I just have to make a quick comment. His girlfriend is one of my best friends. She went to Stanford. I talk to her every day. And if you're not familiar, it's quite scary that we can be CISOs of a company and go to prison if we don't notify.
What were we saying about prophets of doom?
But this is really happening.
So I'm really careful now with the risk quantification and acceptance. I'm sure doing my diligence, writing this down and throwing this out. Hey, I've told you this, and we have strategies in plan, roadmap items in plans, and we're going to mitigate this. If not, you're going to accept the risk. In terms of career plans, I think like Frank said, there is too much tech. I think we all should just leave tech and do something else.
So your career advice is leave the industry. Is that just
it's not worth it.
Okay,
I'm just joking. I think for me, it was about understanding the business, helping the business, and knowing what I'm good at, and monetizing that. Of course, this is, you want to build your career, you want to earn money, you want to progress, and whichever organization I was at, I was looking to help the organization grow in whatever ways possible using my skill set. And in terms of security, strategizing, and using that very limited, finite amount of money that you are tasked with, and being creative about it, and like throwing all the risks in a Excel sheet, sorting by risk or risk like severities, and doing 1, 2, 3 things at a time. And it's like the famous philosopher Rock said, it's about drive, it's about power. So that has been my philosophy.
What about culture? Where does culture kind of fit into any of that?
Culture is really important. I think you can also argue that it's not about tech, it's about people and culture. You can now have all the fancy UEBAs and XDRs and data lakes and correlation rules ever, source and no code and whatnot. People are still the weakest links in the security, and I think the more educated or cyber aware the users are, the more better your company is. And that starts from training and awareness and how you do this, right? It's not like you send them a email or a know before or any other training platforms, or this is something that you do and not instill and have conversations and spread how you do this, how you as a person, but not a security professional do this. How what's a cyber hygiene looks like.
Right.
What you tell your mother or grandmother, it's the same thing that you're going to tell your employees. So culture is definitely important.
Lorenz, what are your thoughts on this career stuff?
So I think for me, the main point is it's easy to be overly protective of your company, your staff, your systems, right? And I've been that type of manager before where I didn't want mistakes to happen. And because of that, I tried to do more things myself than I should have, right? But I realized much too late that letting others fail and take the ownership of that failure, even if it is like maybe a small security breach, is much better and much more valuable than trying to prevent that and trying to actually protect everybody from it. So they need to learn. So I think diversity plays a lot into it. Like one of the things we do is like really try to keep diversity high in our team. So, for example, my tech team is 44% women. We have 18 nationalities, and we only have 50 employees. So it's hugely diverse, and I think that really adds to the whole mix, in a very constructive way.
It certainly does. I was going to ask you if you'd worked in the US, but maybe the second part of your answer, because when you described the fast fail, you didn't use those words, but the fast fail mentality, I found that isn't always the European thing. I have this British thing going on as well, which is definitely not the fast fail mentality. It's all very proper and nobody wants to look bad. Whereas in the US, it's if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough, you're not pushing yourself. Which is Frank?
Well, so think about it. Culture is like these ideas that tie people together. Well, all these ideas are online now. And everything online is at risk because most people have no clue how to protect themselves. And so for me, I work at a nonprofit called 1600 Avenue outside of my professional day-to-day work. And for me, I would beg the people in the room to invest in doing what you do, but think of it in the context of the society we live in. So you say, well, if Fresenius gets hacked, the company loses money. Kinda, but there are families that depend on the people that work there paychecks. There's people that may not get better because systems go down. So there's these cultural impacts, right? And you can't separate them anymore. You can't separate them. So what's driven me in my career is helping companies not be bullied, helping everyday people not be victims. And you say, well, why do I care if someone in Germany gets hacked? Because what hackers do, I hate the word hackers, but what criminals do, they successfully execute a cyber attack and they take that revenue, because it's revenue, and then they reinvest to do more attacks. They go on the dark web, they find credentials. I don't care what country you live in. If I get a credential off the dark web and you're vulnerable, you're fair game. So the expertise in the room, I just challenge all of us, including myself, we have to be better because there's so much at risk. Elections, health, find everything. So, and I think for people who want to progress, you're asking about that, genuinely caring about what is happening and the impact tech has, I think employers, I think companies, I think clients see that really quickly. When I talked to Gisela from your company, she could have given me the canned penetration test. But after talking with her, she went the extra mile. Like, you could tell she's invested in making sure we can protect ourselves. So I think that passion, I think that will get you open more doors for anybody who wants to advance in tech than anything else.
Thanks. We're nearly going to wrap up this session. Any other questions? We've got a couple of minutes. There's a question here. Do you need the mic? Yeah, come on up. There we go, let's try that.
Okay, I've got the mic anyway. I have one slightly cheeky question, which actually leads to my proper second question. So my first question is, in all honesty, how much do your respective companies rely on obscurity for some of your security needs?
Ooh.
No, I'm quite serious because, as has been mentioned several times, you can't afford to do everything. It's the same way you can't do 100% code coverage unless you're completely insane. The same way, how much do you rely on parts of your code base, parts of your services just being hidden and quite difficult to discover versus there being really exhaustive and so forth techniques of protecting them?
Politically, the politically correct way to say that for us anyway, is that we apply security controls and security resources based on business priority and risk. So sometimes you don't have enough resources to protect as much as you would like. So when you run out of those resources, you hope that you would have protected the things that are most business critical. So the things that are obscure, hopefully, or hidden, it's really, you only have so many resources. You can only do so much,
For us, actually, not at all. We don't do any obscurity stuff. It just doesn't work. I used to sit looking at our server logs just to see what happens if you provision a new server, like who contacts us. And there's so many bots, so many spiders. It's like watching really a horror movie, just looking at the logs, everything that gets tried there. So totally not relying on obscurity. I think one thing is, though, there's always a question of if you have a system, if you want to keep maintaining that and make it secure, or if it's maybe better to just shut it down and sunset it. So actually I have quite a lot of initiatives that I just kill because it's better to just not have it than having it badly.
Yeah, we are pretty transparent about our risks, and we can't afford to be obscure because German financial world and auditors are not going to find that nice.
Let's get to your second question then. Come on.
Cheers.
Last time for one more. Go for it.
So my follow-up for that is, when doing testing, obviously there's a number of different systems that interact. You need to be able to simulate different environments and so forth. I suppose this is a slightly anecdotal question, but have you ever found in your career times where enabling testing of a feature or function or service has actually made it more vulnerable because you've introduced a switch that could be attacked?
We were literally talking about that in our breakout.
Thanks.
It's tough, I have seen that because the nature of the test requires you to allow someone to go and try to do privilege escalation, move laterally. And during that process, if anyone in the room, I'm sure, if you give us 2 weeks on a system or set of systems, we're going to find backdoors and things that we could use or someone could use potentially. So I would say a lot of the pen tests I've been involved with do introduce new problems that we didn't know existed, not just the vulnerability. But I think this is a good thing, as long as you have vetted the teams that are doing the testing. So you know that literally when we're vetting, at least when I vet pen testers, I want to see the CV, I want to talk to them. I want to know their background. That person is going to be on the network. So hopefully that type of check will limit your exposure and risk.
These kind of things happens all the time. What we try to do is when We do this in the unit testing and functional testing. We also do security testing, and if there is any vulnerable packages or misconfigurations or secret detection or compliance violation, we try to automatically give a PR back. Let's say none of this worked, and when we pen test the product and we found a vulnerability or we found ourselves at a disadvantage, it's fine. This is why we are doing it, and this is one of the reasons. So we can have a 95% secure product in the prod.
I think I have two answers to that. Thanks. One would be like a case where we had to upgrade a software because there was a critical vulnerability communicated by the supplier, and they gave us the upgrade, and the upgrade broke everything. So then we had the choice between, okay, not having that software or accepting that vulnerability in the old version for some time. So the test kind of opened the understanding of it, but it had to be fixed like reasonably soon. I think that's the main one. I think the other thing is like if we open doors for example, pen testers to like test the next level, that's always an uncomfortable feeling, right? Because there's always an element of trust there. You know that pen tester might just find something, not mention it, you know, and then 3 years down the line check if it's still there and get back at you for whatever, right? So that's always a very uncomfortable feeling.
All right, on that cheerful note, let's break. This is firstly, before we go, thank you very much to our three panelists. Really appreciate you